And we do have a quorum. If you can take a look at the minutes, see if there's any additional or any revisions. And if there aren't any additional revisions, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
I so move.
I second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Would like to sign for those against? The motion passes. Thank you. Before we get to our first item, we want to have Steve Backus come up.
As y'all know, Donna is on vacation for the next 2 weeks, and so I'm kind of stepping in for her for these two meetings. First of all, I want to give you a quick roadmap of what's going to happen over the next several weeks. Next week, you will be receiving your listing of street projects that we'll start going over those. And that schedule goes through November 13th and 20th to review those projects. Staff will be here to go through those with you. In December, we'll work on drainage from December 4th, 11th, and 18th. And then in January 8th, 15th, 22nd, and 24th, we'll be working on parks, trails, miscellaneous facilities, etc. And then on February 5, 12, and 19, you'll be doing your prioritization of all the projects in our bond capacity. So then in March 19 to 21, council takes your priorities, and then we start reviewing that at that point. Second of all, next week, again, we'll be going over the listings for arterials and neighborhood projects. Staff is prioritizing those for you, giving you a listing of those projects in excess of what we'll be able to fund, but we'll get those to you. We are going to remove the water and sewer because it is a bond capacity, and we sell water and sewer on revenue bonds. So it won't be tied to the GO bond program. So when you get those sheets, you'll understand those numbers are strictly for the GO bond sale. And then tonight, our staff, David Solomon, our city engineer, will be presenting items 3 and 4. Then David Stocks, our public works manager, will be presenting item 5, which is your street improvement selection process, how we go through that. Our staff members here, Eric Ferris, assistant city manager, Carol Bassinger, our director of public services, and Gina Thompson, our services. I haven't got it down yet. All right, with that said, David Solomon, would you like to start in the project?
Well, on item number 3, we're going to be talking about the streets that were completed over the last bond program. And I'll be talking about the other financing sources all at the same time, kind of roll it into one item. Also on item number 3, we're not going to have the PowerPoint up on the screen. We're going to try to use our GIS, and we're going to pull up the projects on the map so you can see them, but you can follow along if you want when we get to the PowerPoint part, on your paper copy. We wanted to start out with the map that showed, in general, all the streets that were addressed over the past bond program. Most of these streets were funded through the last bond program, although I think has been mentioned before, from time to time the city has other funding opportunities that come up. And so some of these streets were actually funded by alternate funding sources. But this is a total picture of streets that have been rebuilt or refurbished over the course of our last 2003 bond program.
What do the different colors mean? Is that just a different classification?
The red, actually the red streets, right on this map, the red is the streets that
And the blue are
The
boundaries?
blue is a boundary.
Yeah,
Boundaries?
the city limits,
City
and then these are just state highways and the tollway.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Red
So,
are the ones.
on this map, it's the
I
red.
guess I was looking at the handout and that's different.
Yeah, the map,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, see if I turn off the layer, you can see the streets that come on or
The different colors, I believe, are just the neighborhoods and I'm not for sure.
yeah, in the PowerPoint, we were afraid that, because we were looking at such a small piece of paper, that if we made it all one color, it'd be hard to distinguish between one neighborhood and the next. So we made it
Okay.
different colors on the PowerPoint, but on the GIS, it's, anyway, the main thing one other thing I wanted to point out before I left this map was, you can see, money was spread out, in various areas of the city, which is, something we obviously try to do. We try not to spend all of our money in one area of the city.
What was done right over there on Valley Ridge Boulevard?
Yeah, well, we'll get to that. I'm gonna
Oh,
go over
okay.
the individual projects.
okay.
You'll
There you
notice,
go. Okay.
as you flip to the next, if you flip to
Okay.
the second page in your project recap portion of the, there's a chart with a listing of streets, and actually that is the first street, Valley Ridge Boulevard.
That was a 2-lane, it was carried, I think it was 2-lane
Let me
originally, and
back out of
carried to
this.
4-lane and the divided, and
Oh,
all the
okay.
drainage issues
Yeah,
passed by your house.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, so that was done way back in 97.
It was, I believe that portion was done back around 2003.
2000,
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Expansion before. Yeah, it was
Okay.
an expansion before, didn't it?
okay, yeah.
Yeah, it was basically an expansion. I mean, the street was already there. That was funded through the bond program last time, that segment of Valley Ridge Boulevard. The next project was Westlake Park. Back out a little bit. There we go. You see, these are the streets. This is one of our neighborhoods. You've heard us say before, or you've probably seen that we try to use a neighborhood approach when we start doing the local streets. And this is a neighborhood that we did all at one time, the Westlake Park neighborhood, and these are all the streets that were completely rebuilt. Brand new curb and gutter, pavement, drainage, and then of course, through the revenue bonds, the utilities were done as well. The next one on the list, and so far the Valley Ridge was obviously complete. This project is complete. Serendipity Village was broken into 2 phases. One phase is complete, the other phase is in design. The majority of Serendipity Village was covered in phase 1 and it's been completed. Phase 2 includes Madison, it includes Foxwood Place, and then around the circle. And then I also think there's one, this little cul-de-sac over here. So other than those 3 streets, the rest of it was phase 1 and those are complete. The remainder of the streets are roughly at about 60% design right now.
It looks good over there too.
Yeah, that turned out real nice. It was a bit of a challenge, but it turned out nicely.
How do you decide which areas get the paved streets? Just based on need or how old or?
Well, I think David's gonna get into that
I'll
a
talk
little bit later.
about
Okay.
that, kind of explain the process of how we selected the areas that we're going to
Okay.
target.
Okay.
And actually, this same group, that's what you're going through for the next round, same process.
We're gonna show you each of those projects and kind of describe the conditions in those projects and show you some pictures.
Okay.
So you'll get a feel for what the conditions
Yeah,
are.
I mean, so basically it's a two-step process. Staff goes through an entire process of trying to rank what needs to be done first, and then of course the bond committee will then kind of massage that, you know, and then, like as Steve said, then that goes to city council.
Okay. And you'll describe or have a description of what is considered bad, like a bad street? Or do you have a picture of it?
Yes, we'll show you plenty of pictures.
Good.
I mean, I know what I would
Picture in
think,
2 weeks.
but you guys may be saying, that's a good street, that's nothing.
And that's a difficult decision, because
Yeah.
you're trying to project 5 and 10 years into the future. At the same time, you're looking at the conditions today.
Okay.
You don't want to be late,
Yeah,
put it that way.
yeah.
Next street on the list is Northwest Old Town. And these are the streets that we're going to redo. On this particular project, we're gonna go back with concrete. We're gonna attempt to put curb and gutter on these streets and get rid of the roadside ditches. Although we are going to obtain a very minimal amounts of right-of-way. So we're gonna have to use some alternate street sections in this area because some of the right-of-ways in this area of town are a little bit narrower than our standard subdivisions. So this project is going to take a little bit of additional effort coming up with the street sections and working with the property owners and the residents to make sure that we come up with a street section that really meets their needs. And of course we'll address drainage as well. Now this project has not been started yet. I would anticipate sometime right after the first of the year, we'll be selecting a consultant to start the design on this area. The next group of streets are streets that were completed through economic development agreements. First one being the Pulte Streets, which is over there in the townhome area south of Main Street. Valley Ridge, from 121 to the end. Was completed through an economic development agreement. And then on the very far east end, Windhaven Parkway, you know, out there behind the shopping center, Windhaven, east of Josie Lane, was completed as a economic development project. Okay, the Westwood subdivision was done in 2 phases. What we called our Westwood Phase 1 was everything south of Fox Avenue, and it's been complete for quite a while. Westwood Phase 2 was completed, I think it was last year. It hasn't been finished all that long. I know that it's probably been about a year since, probably less than a year since this was completed, and that was everything north of Fox Avenue. You'll notice on your PowerPoint that we added the Bel Air Heights subdivision. What happened there was, we got exceptionally good bids on the Westwood project. Actually, on both Westwood projects, we got good bids. And so we had enough money to complete and rebuild the Bel Air Heights, which are the blue streets immediately to the south of Westwood. So this smaller subdivision was done with the cost savings from Westwood. In our last bond program, we have money for the aesthetics for the I-35 bridges. Back a little bit here. I think we have roughly 1.6 million or something in our bond program for those aesthetics. Denton County had $5 million. So that's going to bring us a little bit over $6 million total for these aesthetics. We're in phase 1 construction of I-35.
David, look at continued expansion of I-35. How much money is being funded from TxDOT to help support bridges across Main Street?
I'm sorry.
Is TxDOT funding some of the improvement in the bridges across 35?
Yeah.
How does that money get divided up?
Okay, what the city is paying for are the aesthetic improvements over and above the standard TxDOT design. For instance, additional landscaping, decorative lighting, form liners for the abutment walls, and yeah, that kind of thing.
TxDOT has all the bridge infrastructure of the 3 bridges, that'd be Fox, 407, and Garden Ridge.
Yeah.
And the basic infrastructure there, we just adding, like David said, the aesthetics to it. And then the major lanes, all the lane improvements are done by TxDOT.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Fox, Garden Ridge, and Bathtown.
When do you think those will be built?
407 is being constructed now, and we'll have a lane closed, or have the bridge coming down probably after the first of the year. I think that is general information. Once they complete that, they will then move to Garden Ridge. Is that correct, David?
Correct.
And rebuild that. And then some period in time, I don't know if it's together simultaneously, but then they'll work on Fox Avenue.
Yeah, I don't know how the timing of Fox will work in. I will mention that Fox is only going to be partially constructed this time, although what they build now is not going to be a throwaway bridge. What they build now, they're simply going to be able to add on to when phase 2 comes along. So we're not throwing money away.
What about Main Street?
Main Street and Valley Ridge.
Those are bridges that'll be rebuilt in phase 2.
Okay. Yeah, because they just put in sidewalks on Valley Ridge. Now 407, are we still gonna have that curve, or is it gonna be straight?
No, it's gonna go underneath.
Push under.
Yeah, with 407 will. Yeah, you'll actually go underneath. It'll be a normal diamond interchange. I will mention, and this doesn't have anything to do with the previous funding, but I mean, as long as we're on the topic, you know, there is going to be minor work done at some of these other bridges that aren't shown, but it's for instance, all they're going to do on Main Street is move some of the support structures to make room for the additional lanes. But the deck of the bridge is going to remain the same. So it's not that they're not going to do any work on it, it's just not going to be any, from the surface, it's not going to look any different.
Will the trail master plan feed into connecting Old Town and the west side of 35?
Well, I think we're still working on that. In fact, that's part of it when we get to the trails, you know, and the portion of our process, then I think we're gonna talk about that.
Yes, there will be some. It's not, I mean, again, this is phase one, phase two, and wide gap, and won't all be at front. Garden Ridge, for example, bridge will have a trail, and we just received a grant from 35 down to, it's either College or Valley Parkway from the state, so we'll be able to expand that bridge to cross. Those are things we'll come up with in the trail section. But yeah, there'll be some crossover.
You might recall several years ago, Fox Avenue was rebuilt. That was actually done with through ELAP funding, which is came from the Denton County Transportation Authority. So that was money that we didn't have. I think we had a match. The city had there was some match money in there. But the majority of the funding was actually provided through the DCTA.
Anyone can remember Fox Avenue, it was asphalt and it was a little rough at the end. Very thankful when this project came through.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a perfect example of a project where we had to put very little city money into it, and we actually had an alternate funding method. We didn't have to use our own. We had originally planned to make improvements on Valley Parkway, and back, I guess, in 2003, there was some significant rehabilitation done on that, panel replacements and such, so that project was not completed or done with the last bond program. Because we felt it was addressed appropriately with the rehab that occurred in 2003. The last bond program included money for a public safety training facility. I'm sure most of you probably don't go out here very often, but it's out there on Treatment Plant Road, and there was a significant addition to that training facility. The next project was Southwest Lewisville improvements. This was a combination of funding. There was property owner participation, as well as Denton County funding, and some city funding as well. So this was a combination project, again, where the city did not have to use all of its own money, but had other funding sources. For the most part, these roads were non-existent and were built from scratch. You know, prior to this project, of course, we had Ace Lane came straight down by the mobile home park, and then Spinks Road, I believe, ended about mid-block. The city picked that up and continued it all the way over to Duncan Lane, and then extended Valley Parkway all the way down to Highway 121.
We were very thankful to see the changes to Ace Lane too. That used to be narrow and crowded.
Yeah, so
The
that.
Sphinx edition has been a godsend for those of us who live on the south side of Lewisville.
Is that right?
Okay, I go that way to get from my house to the mall.
Okay.
I drop down and go over.
You can take Mr. Ridge Mall Drive all around?
Yeah, going from where I lived to Irving, I used to take Ace Lane down. It was several times before or quite a while before I realized I was going through that private property.
Yes. You weren't the only one.
He kept it private because he closed the gate on Christmas Eve or one of those days, and that's the way he kept it private.
Midway Road is another project that we currently have in design. It's roughly at 90% design right now. This project is actually, the majority of it is funded by Denton County 888 bonds. And the city did have to pay some amount to make up the difference between what the cost estimate is versus what money was available in the 888 Denton County bonds. But the lion's share of this is actually being funded by Denton County, and again, that's under design. We're roughly at 90% design. In addition to the northwest Old Town streets that I mentioned earlier, we're also going to do the streets in northeast Old Town. It's going to be the same type of project where we'll convert the streets from asphalt to concrete. We're going to put curb and gutter on them, include drainage improvements. And again, just like the other streets, because the right-of-ways out there in this area of Lewisville are not quite as wide as some of the newer areas, we're going to have to work very closely with the property owners and residents to come up with alternate street sections that work, for the neighborhood.
Will there be any sidewalks in this improvement, or just a?
Some of them will. Again, it's going to be one of those, we're going to try to do sidewalks if we can, assuming the right-of-way allows and depending on what we end up with on the street width. Some of them may only have sidewalk on one side. The street sections are really open for debate right now until we have a chance to hire someone to do the design and get some neighborhood input.
That drawing may be a little off. It says Church Street, and
Can you
actually
zoom in?
Walter Street.
Yeah, actually it's supposed to be
Walters, so just,
Oh,
Yeah, this, I don't know, yeah.
I just saw that.
But that will change one of our goals about walkability.
And that's why I asked about the sidewalks, because from the DCTA stop over to the east there, and how to, if there's sidewalks to get people into.
Yeah, how that's working, DCTA has $30 million on the trail grant, and that's working. It's already in design with engineering and the city. They will come, Dave, why don't you explain?
Well, yeah, actually they're having a pre-construction meeting within the next 2 weeks.
So, yeah.
The DCTA, as Steve was explaining, received a grant from TxDOT, and they'll be having a pre-construction meeting here in the next couple of weeks to start building the trail that will link all 3 train stations. Now, I think phase 1 is going to come short of going all the way north, but phase 1 will start at the south end at the Hebron station, come up through Railroad Park, along Valley Ridge, and then along East College, go north on Keeley, and then eventually we'll follow Valley Ridge when it's extended over to Mill Street, and then north on Mill Street up to the DCTA right-of-way.
Awesome. I think one of the things to note on that is that while it's going to be primarily north-south, because of where the stops are, there will be some east-west pathways created too, so through those neighborhoods.
We'll get to those in the trail program, yes.
Awesome.
And also you have the Old Town, you
Yeah,
have
the
the
main
Mill and
mill.
Main Street project. Will also increase that east-west and north-south in downtown, in the Old Town area, so.
Yeah, we're in the very early stages of design on Mill Street and Main, and those will include bike and pedestrian improvements as well.
And if you come out of the train station, I think you actually have to come south to Main because of that drainage ditch and the tracks. So that puts you on sidewalks essentially.
Yeah, and the project we're working on now with with the East Main and Mill Street is funded again through a grant that was received through the COG. The next group of streets is the North Mill area. This project is in the very early stages of design, and Mill Street is going to be converted from asphalt to concrete up to about the point where the cursor is pointing, and then this portion up above is going to be rebuilt with asphalt, but it is going to have curb and gutter.
Now, there's some pretty significant trees up in that area. How do they figure into the plan? Is there consideration taken for that?
I don't think that probably
I have friends that live up in that
won't get
area.
into any trees.
Some large trees.
Yeah, I don't think you'll affect any of the trees at all.
Yeah, because I mean, we're going to try to stay within the inside of the existing right-of-way.
Oh, okay.
Now, you'll notice that, you know, a couple of these streets up here right now don't have curb and gutter, so we're going to add curb and gutter to those.
The curb and
We're
gutter
trying to
will
put
make a
underground
significant
drainage, but we're
difference.
going to try to fit it all within the existing right-of-way.
There is one cottonwood tree that's about, if you go down to end, it's been hit about 50 times.
Yeah, he probably needs to go.
Yeah, that one might have to leave just
Yeah.
because of its,
Smart board.
yeah.
I know people that live up in that area, and they're concerned about their trees, you know, because you have some water oaks and some unusual trees up in that area.
It will not affect the treed area, and I think that we'll stay in the right of way. It's old 77 right of way, the old highway went up before 35.
Yeah, this is Mill, and you can see the existing right of ways there. Old humpback asphalt street that's in bad shape. Go spin it.
Oh, it needs
Dave.
done badly.
Spin it, here we go, I'll spin it for you. It's in pretty bad condition, and you can see it, this is as it goes north. You can see the crack seals and everything else, and pretty much the trees are offset, so the idea is work with what we have, but go concrete.
And of course, wider, and then curb and gutter.
Right.
I'm curious, and this may be something that's just everybody knows, but what is the lifespan of asphalt
Depends.
on average?
Well,
I mean, I know what it is for my neighborhood.
roughly,
It's not very long.
roughly 10
Depends
years
on the weather.
compared to a 20 or 30 year
Okay.
lifespan on concrete.
Okay.
In this portion down, once we leave Forest Park or whatever the name of
Yeah,
that
from
street
here
is,
north.
where we're gonna cut it off, goes into the flood zone at that point. So if the lake gets above 532,
Right.
533, that whole bottom area floods up to about halfway up to the condos
Okay.
on the road. And then that whole 13 acres there generally floods too. So then you just got the two streets where you had the horseshoe or that little rectangle there. Those are generally just light residential streets. So they don't carry a lot of traffic. So one reason, the consideration of asphalt was simply on the flooding issue. Because it will.
And then you take into consideration how heavily it's traveled.
Right.
And all those other factors to decide what it warrants. And
Right.
then just the upkeep of it still is less than concrete at the end of the day when you measure out things over a lifespan.
Yeah, we had about 2 years ago, we had a consultant do a report for us based on, the life of asphalt versus concrete, and then factored in the expected maintenance over a 30-year period. And of course, I'm talking in general terms, but in general, an asphalt street will cost you about 20% less to build at the beginning But then over the course of 30 years, because you have to actually replace that or do major maintenance on that 3 times, as opposed to a concrete street that you probably only have to do significant maintenance on 1 time over 30 years. The costs turn out to be much less expensive to have concrete when you factor in that maintenance.
But over a 30-year time
Yeah.
period, so there's your difference there, okay.
And you can plan your maintenance on concrete a little better, because asphalt problems show up overnight.
Sure.
You can patch it today, you're out there tomorrow patching it. You have very little warning.
And
I have an asphalt street, so that's why I'm asking, just because I know through my lifespan there, what's taken place over the years, so, okay.
And one of the things that Lewisville has not going for it is the fact of our soil condition. We have very expansive clays, whether it's asphalt, concrete, the Indian Oaks area, the southern region seems to be more aggressive
My
and
neighborhood being
expansive
one of those.
area. And so
Yeah.
you have problems with both concrete
All
and
the time.
asphalt based on that expansive clay soil as well.
Okay.
And I think concrete does a much better job of bridging that problem than asphalt does.
Now, I'll apologize, I guess we missed a street on our list here, but Corporate Drive between Waters Bridge and Railroad Street. I mean, it's shown on the map, I just can't highlight it with a color.
Hey.
Eric can
Go
draw.
ahead, Eric can draw it in.
Oh, okay.
We have a new board here that we can play.
Learning.
Oh, the punch.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, a little straighter.
from Waters Ridge, punch through to Railroad, this segment here. And this was significant because you had a rail crossing that was kind of a pain to get done, so it delayed the project, but this has been complete.
Yeah, it's complete. I'll mention that again, alternate funding source. This money was actually done with regional toll revenue funding. And of course, there was some city, I think a 10% city match and a 10% county match. So 80% of it was funded through the COG, 10% city and 10% county. So again, you know, the city had very little money involved in the project comparatively with the total project cost. McKenzie had, got that one. The McKenzie Hembry area, we haven't started design on that yet either. It's the design will start shortly after the first of the year. Very similar to the Old Town streets that we talked about earlier. A lot of these streets, especially in the northern portion of this area, have small right-of-ways. So again, this is going to be one of those streets where we do intend to put curb and gutter and concrete pavement. You know, what we're going to do with sidewalks and exactly how wide the streets are is going to be a function of working with the neighborhood and trying to figure out what we can fit inside the right-of-way and also taking into consideration input from the neighborhood in terms of what they want.
What happens is, if we don't have the right of way, generally, the homeowner, if you have the money, and you're able to do it, you have to get the dedication or donation from the property owner. We've done this in 2 areas at Old Town, and on both occasions, the citizens did not want to give that extra right of way. So there are no sidewalks. One, it's an expense, but the second thing is, you don't want a city going in and trying to condemn property for sidewalk, you're going to kill. So again, it was on a donation, or, you know, the giving that easement, sidewalk easement, or the right of way. And in 2 cases, it has not occurred.
Wow.
So this is Hardy, and you can kind of see the right of way where the utility lines are. This, I believe, is looking
Looking north.
north.
And I believe we did that sidewalk as a CDBG project.
We did, yes. And these are the houses that were actually put in with CCA and Habitat, but that's looking south as it goes toward McKenzie. So just an old humpback asphalt road. Generally speaking, it's, you know, it's drivable. It's not as patchwork quilt as some of the others we have, but again, very substandard.
And again, looking at the timing, what happens in the next 5 to 10 years, those types of streets.
Yeah.
This is probably a good example here.
Isn't that area behind Macedonia Church?
Yes, that's it.
Oh.
And for Ash, Birch, it goes on over to Sycamore Creek to the south. There's 2.2 areas over there, or 2 streets, Ash and Birch.
Yeah.
I believe.
There's a good one.
This is Redbud coming off of Purnell to the south, looking south. I mean, very inadequate, just basically has
Like
one
patchwork or
continuous
something?
rut patch. And then as it approaches Purnell to the north, Excel
Okay, Eric,
is.
we need to move on.
Yeah, good work there, Dave. So these roads really need some help.
There's very little traffic on that road, so we keep it passable, but we don't commit a lot of time there.
It needs to be
I'll be honest.
freshened up. Sorry, Dave.
Thank you.
And the last, we've got just some miscellaneous streets that have been completed. Railroad Street between Bennett Lane and 121. You'll recall that before that was completed, it was just an old asphalt road. It flooded almost every time it rained. And of course, it was in very bad shape, a lot of potholes. And of course, now it's a nice, wide concrete street with curb and gutter, and the drainage is obviously much better, so.
My dogs appreciate it.
Get to the park.
Gotta get to the park.
I don't think that's flooded since it's been built. Will it flood, David, or do you know?
You know, I think it could if we really had a big rain, but I mean, we haven't had anything that,
Oh.
yeah,
And take a dilly right now.
yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, and I think we're all familiar with this area out here, I mean, there's a lot of wetlands and it's very flat, so to be honest with you, it's pretty hard to design drainage that would withstand some of the, 5 and 6 and 7 inch rains that we have, that we haven't had in a long time, but obviously do occur. So I won't say that it'll never be underwater, but certainly not anywhere near the way it was before.
Will any of the ponds that were built with the park help with that flooding, or is it too far away from those?
I don't know that it will help with the street so much. I mean, it'll help with flooding in general in that area. But
There's a levee that runs up by the park and over, so the area where the park is and the animal shelter and all that was in the floodplain behind that levee, and so that's what was raised. Those ponds are actually to take that runoff from that field area and put it back in those areas to the creek. I don't know how much it affects, as David said, Railroad Street itself.
here's a project we're very excited about. We just opened bids on this last week. And we expect the construction to start maybe toward the middle or late December. And it's the extension of Valley Ridge all the way from Mill Street over to College.
Let me interject one point there. From College south to 121 on Valley Ridge was constructed by BFI Republic Landfill. Those 4 lanes were a donation to the city at that point. So it's another funny, it was way outside of this project or timeline, but that piece of the project again was developer contributed.
The other thing I'd like to mention about this section of Valley Ridge is that this is a joint project with Denton County. The city is paying for half and Denton County is paying for half.
What about at Mill and Valley Ridge? I know I've just read articles about like the connection and getting rid of roads and things like that. Is that, you have that finalized now?
Yes, after a little bit of a process this summer and various neighborhood meetings, we came up with a plan.
Blow it up a little bit. So, to get Valley Ridge Crossing in, DCTA says for one new crossing, you should, DART, their policy is you remove 2 crossings. For a new rail crossings, you remove 2. So we negotiated down to a 1-on-1. So the problem here with Cowan was with Valley Ridge Crossing, this would be a new crossing. So what we had to do was basically look at, in proximity to this crossing was really maybe 100 feet. The intersection is about 100 feet apart, and the crossings were not much more than that, 140 or 150 feet apart. So this crossing had to go. It's a bad intersection anyway because it comes in at a 30. Cowan used to go straight through, and on the old arrows you could see it. Well, when they built Valley Ridge, they swung Cowan in down here.
Now I'm drawing.
Hang on.
Y'all might want to take a break.
So Cowan used to go, answer the question quickly, Cowan used to go straight through. You can kind of see this. When Valley Ridge was built, they swung Cowan in the middle to make it a 90-degree. Well, there's an offset, there is a problem. And this intersection is a problem, especially in the morning. People are coming out of here and they're trying to come all the way across 2 lanes plus the 3 lanes and do this. It's nearly impossible with the light stack. Plus, you have a rail crossing here. You have an overhead rail here. So you have a huge embankment. The question was, can we somehow realign Cowan and not close it? So Dave and the engineering crew took a look at it. You'd have to come down here. You'd have to come down to the embankment and then come across and somehow get in over here, but it just doesn't work. You would have to come way out here, but there's no way to do it to stay out of the existing right-of-way for DCTA. The toe of the slope here is here, so that just wasn't gonna happen. So what we had to do, and long story short, was to build the dead-end Cowan at the end of the Valley Ridge project and put a cul-de-sac. Put a cul-de-sac over here and dead-end Cowan. We would leave the right-of-way here for a trail, for a sidewalk to come across and to hook into Valley Ridge, where the kids or pedestrians can use this light to cross. And this would be a gated crossing here, but Cowan would dead into this cul-de-sac. Now that's not popular. That's been a done deal. We've met with the folks out here. We're actually doing all kinds of things to look for secondary ways into this subdivision. What you're going to see is we're going to talk about improving Morningside and Crescent as it grids back to the north to Jones. We'll have to improve these 2 streets because they're humpback asphalts. We're probably going to try to be working through the mobile home park to punch through to Keeley, and there's a fire lane that runs through here. So we would probably box and build an emergency evacuation route where we could get people out of here and come over to Keeley if an event were to happen up north by, let's say, something happened at the water plant, bad. There's no way to get out here, although we're going to widen the trail through the underpass and probably do 10-foot wide or 12-foot wide path where you could take vehicles and pickups and slowly get them out this way in an emergency situation and or use this. So this is kind of a little neighborhood meeting that we're working on right now, and it's all centered around streets and things. The good news is this is going in. The bad news is there was no way to avoid or to not close Cowan and then close that crossing. And that was unfortunate, bad news, but the folks up here were troopers. We met with them several times. The council met with them. We've made some improvements to get the school buses off Cowan onto this site to unload. They're still having trouble with a few drivers. We're going to improve Morningside and Crescent. Dave's also going to widen Jones Street from Cowan down to Mill for more capacity. So that's going on. So a lot happening in that neighborhood with Valley Ridge.
Right, well, and to add to that, next week when we start talking about the street list, this upcoming bond program, you'll see one of the projects is to rebuild Cowan, Jones Street going back to the east, and then the north end of Keeley.
Some trivia information, Eric, you heard both DCTA and DART mentioned. DART owns the rail bed, the actual property. DCTA leases the surface rights to install DCTA rail. So you'll hear both. A lot of people don't know that, but it's a little trivia information for you. DART owns the rail bed all the way up to Denton.
And of course, the last project that I was going to mention is that the bond program. The last bond program also funded the alley improvements for the plaza. It's obviously under construction. So.
Thanks for not mentioning the plaza, David. I appreciate it.
Maybe Eric can show us.
Yeah, no.
Okay. Moving to item number 4, we've got a short presentation on the thoroughfare plan, just as an overview. Back out a little bit. This is basically our city thoroughfare plan that's been installed as a layer on our GIS. The roads that are sort of a gold color are considered arterial streets, which for the most part means they're either 4 or 6 lane divided. The streets that are shown in various colors of green or bluish green are considered collector streets. Those are generally streets that don't have medians. They can be either 4 lanes with no median, or sometimes they're just 2 lanes, but they're wider than a normal residential street. And then of course the streets that, just the black streets are just your neighborhood streets. And you'll notice a few streets that have a kind of a bright yellow highlighting on those. Those are what we call our
Major traffic carriers.
Major traffic carriers. Thank you. It doesn't really change the section of the street. The main thing, if a street is designated as a major traffic carrier, it really affects our regulations with regard to how often we allow driveways and how often we allow median openings. Obviously, a street that carries more traffic, we want to have fewer driveways and fewer median openings so that we don't have quite as much interruption in the traffic. So that's what that bright yellow highlighting means. It really has more to do with the regulations concerning access. Now we're going to attempt to again, this is just a thoroughfare plan. As you've got in your PowerPoint presentation. Just a little bit of an overview. Most of our thoroughfare plan is actually complete. I would say over 95%. Obviously exceptions are the extension of Valley Ridge, which we're hoping to start construction on pretty soon. And there's a couple of other smaller streets that haven't been completed yet. But for the most part, our thoroughfare plan is all but complete. In Lewisville, all residential streets and the majority of thoroughfares have been funded through private development. Again, there are some exceptions, as we've seen back when we were in item number 3, the city does, and the county has funded some of that, but the lion's share of our thoroughfares and all of our residential streets were originally constructed by private developers. Of course, you know, once the streets are on the ground, it's the city's responsibility to take care of them and maintain them and replace them when that time comes. Most capital improvement projects in Lewisville involve either rehabilitation or reconstruction of an existing thoroughfare or an existing street. Very rarely do we build a brand new street. Of course, you know, in item number 3, we talked about a couple of them that we're doing, but those are the rare exceptions. Most of our capital improvement money goes to replace streets that are already existing.
When a developer puts a street on the ground, is there any money put into escrow for its maintenance, or has that ever been done?
Generally not. Typically when the developer builds a street, they do put up a 2-year maintenance bond for 100% of the value of the street. So if anything, if we have any problems with workmanship or material within the first 2 years that street is on the ground, then we try to get the developer to come back and fix it. If we can't, then we can always file on their bonds. After that 2-year period, then it's basically the city's responsibility to take care of anything that happens. And again, you know, there's some exceptions where the city has actually built some streets, you know, Valley Ridge, and then of course Corbett Drive project between Waters Ridge and 2281. Those streets are obviously non-existent, and those will be partially funded through our bond programs. Very quickly, we have some standard street sections that, you know, whether it's a developer or whether it's the city building the streets, these are pretty much what we follow. We have our 6-lane arterial, which is generally a 10-inch thick concrete pavement. It's you know, 3 lanes in each direction with a 25-foot median in the center, with sidewalks on both sides. We have a 4-lane divided thoroughfare with, again, the 25-foot median, of course a narrower pavement, a narrower right-of-way, same sidewalks on both sides, and this is also a 10-inch concrete pavement. Then we get into our collector streets. There's our 4-lane collector. It has an 8-inch reinforced concrete pavement. Again, a narrower right-of-way because you don't have to keep room for the median. And of course the curb and gutter and the sidewalks.
Hey Dave, stop on that one. Does everybody understand what right-of-way means and what it is? If you're looking at a cross-section, 80 foot of right-of-way is the city's property. The right-of-way lines, this is a cross-section, look, but if you, like when you're at your house, it's the same thing. This line here and a property line is one and the same. So the right-of-way line and your, like out your front door, your front property line, that line is the same line, okay? This is the city's property. Get out of there. Great.
And escape, David.
What?
Escape.
Escape on your keyboard.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. So an 80 foot of right-of-way gives you a 49-foot back-to-back. You'll see this term back-to-back. That's literally back of curb, back to curb, concrete street. A parkway is that distance between the back of curb and the edge of the right-of-way. So that's, you may hear that term, or you may see that term. So when you look at a cross-section of a street and a street type, that's what he's looking at, a collector 4-lane undivided. It takes 80 foot of right-of-way of property to build it, to put a 49-foot back-to-back 4-lane undivided street in there. And again, the parkway distances in this case would be 15.5 feet from the edge of the back of that pavement to the property line or right-of-way line, which, oh yeah, by the way, in a lot of cases has your sidewalk in it, sidewalk, bike lane, or whatever else. Sometimes you'll see a sidewalk in residential areas like in Castle Hills that you have a much narrower right-of-way, but you'll have a sidewalk easement in somebody's front yard. Now, that's been the battle for Old Town streets, that when people say, we want sidewalks, we need an easement or we need right-of-way, and they say, not in my front yard, you're not. So that's what Dave's talking about. We can only do what we can do. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So that's been the struggle in developed areas. When you're building a new street across the old prairie, that's easy. Blow and go. You know, I've seen that with the North Tollway expansion when it went up to Frisco, and it's real easy to build a street through a field. They can build all of it at once and they can just go. When we have to build a street or rebuild a street, and David has to do it, Stocks, they have to build half the street, keep everybody happy, well, semi-happy on the other side, then flip it. And that's very difficult with grades already set by driveways and finished floor elevations of a house to keep their sidewalk, their lead walks coming down. So this is kind of an important concept for you to understand, because it's going to get back into some of the things you may be considering for a redesign as you get into some of those older streets and what you have to design and think about when you're trying to fund something. So I just want to make sure I was clear on the terms.
I wanted to ask a question, either one of you guys can answer. So, like some of those pictures we saw where they had no sidewalk, and you want to redo the street, and there was one street that pavements are, the asphalt was really bad. Are you going to go in and create sidewalks, even though it's not, is it already owned by the owners? So are you going to create sidewalks on that, or is just for the street?
On that street, I think you were talking about the picture of Redbud Street.
Right, yeah.
On that street, we probably will not build sidewalks simply because I think there's one or two commercial buildings there, but there aren't any homes on that street.
Okay.
So I doubt that we will build sidewalks on those. Now, some of the other streets that are similar to that have homes on them, you know, we're going to attempt to put sidewalks on those streets, you know, assuming we can come up with a street section that provides enough room and we can stay within the existing right-of-way without having to get additional easements, so.
And all it takes is one individual to say no.
And then, yeah.
Well, yeah, because the problem is that then you can't build it continuous.
Yeah,
I mean, if one property owner says no and the next one says yes, I mean, it doesn't make sense to build a piece of a sidewalk and then have a gap.
Yeah, I agree.
And their driveway has an effect on that. In some previous surveys and inquiries, they knew their cars would back out over the sidewalk, and they knew they couldn't do that. So that turned them against the sidewalk as well, because they used the full length of that driveway.
So again, when we go into those neighborhoods like that, when we start our process with the Old Town streets that have already been funded, or the McKenzie-Hembry area, we're going to start with the neighborhood meeting before we even let our engineers start the design work, so that we can get some sort of idea of what the neighborhood's going to expect and want, and so that we don't go down the wrong path and then end up having to redesign it. We've got a couple of different sections that we use for our residential streets. In a lot of our newer neighborhoods that have front entry garages.
Hey Dave, go to your current slide up there and we'll make it a little bit bigger. Go up top to your toolbar.
Oh, toolbar.
Current slide, currents, go left.
Current?
Yeah.
Next one from the current side, there you go.
There we go.
There you go.
Thank you.
See a little better now.
Yeah, no, I can use the arrows. We have one that has what's called surmountable curve, and I'm sure all of you have seen this, where basically, you know, you drive over the curb into your driveway. The reason we built this kind of curb section for front entry houses, especially in a new neighborhood, we require it when a developer builds it, is because you know, the developer comes in, they build all the streets, and then they sell the lots to home builders. And the home builder is very often a separate entity from the entity that actually built the subdivision. So you've got one company that builds a subdivision, and then they hand it off to a home builder. Well, of course, you know, some subdivisions, depending on how large they are, I mean, it can take 2, 3, and 4 years, or maybe even more to fill those
The spots.
spots of, yeah, the lots. And if we didn't do this kind of curb and gutter, that means that every time somebody built a house in one of those new subdivisions, you would have to cut the brand new curb and gutter to put the driveway in. And then you'd end up with, you know, basically every, you know, 50 or 60 feet, you'd have a driveway cut out. And anytime that you cut the curb like that and then have to seal it back, it's never as good as brand new, and it provides an opportunity for water to get under the pavement. So that's why you'll see a lot of this kind of street in our newer subdivisions with front entry garages. And then we've got our standard curb and gutter residential street section. And this is generally in the older neighborhoods existing. You'll find this kind of section as well as any kind of new neighborhoods that have alleys. We'll do this type of street section.
Let's take a look at that. And when you're talking about your residential streets, Westwood 1 and Westwood 2, y'all remember where those were? They were 50-foot right-of-ways, but in a lot of cases, those were 27, 26, and 28-foot streets. So we wanted to go back with 31s or 33s, but the problem was through the years, in this Parkway section out here, unbelievable. Yeah, go back. Just go back up,
David.
There we go. So in the Parkway section here, through the years, homeowners had planted trees, or they planted trees very close out here. And, you know, when you go back to try to widen the street, if it's a 27 and a 50, and we want to go 31 because they park on both sides, hey, my street's narrow, we want wider streets, police, fire can't get down it. That all changes when you start showing them the trees are going to have to come out. Or if we try to save them, they'll probably die. So we went back in Westwood with all best intentions. We started 31s, but we had several streets where we had to go 27 and a half, 28 to try to save the trees. And we saved some died, but that's always been an issue. Now, whether the homeowner did it, the builder did it out here, or it's really close, that's a problem. That's a problem. And I'm not saying it's a good or bad problem. It's an issue when you go into those neighborhood meetings like he's talking about. We get their viewpoints. You can see how that momentum swings in those discussions. I don't want to take my trees down. So some of the streets we've redone are new. They're not. Why aren't they 31 or 33? Because we were working to save the trees, or there may have been something else there. Maybe it was storm sewer or some grade issues where the drives were coming down and the lead walks were coming down. So again, this relationship here of what's going on here with, as Stocks was saying, the driveways coming down or trees, we're gonna have to, y'all will be looking at some of those and some of the other residential streets, or some of the other streets we're looking at, to put a hybrid in there maybe of some sort.
Well, and then the other issue that comes into play that's really taken a forefront here is of course ADA compliance. And a lot of the ADA compliance has to do with the slope of the sidewalk. So, and of course the ramps at the intersections.
Those trees can wreak havoc on sidewalks. I was taking pictures today of sidewalks that were raised up 6 inches by the tree root.
Yeah, that was my last slide. I think the next part is yours.
If I have trouble, I'll get Eric. You may have to show me how to launch it between my bad vision and lack of control here. Good job. We're getting there. Okay, I'd like to talk a little about maintenance and repairs. I'd like to describe our condition survey that we have done. And then I'll talk about all the different aspects we looked at in putting together the projects that we're going to present to you. If you have any questions, just feel free to jump in. If I can't get an answer today, I can bring one back next week. Well, when I think of street maintenance, I lump it into 3 general categories. You've got minor maintenance and repairs, you've got panel replacements and overlays, and then you have complete reconstruction. I think of it as small, medium, and large. In Public Works, we do those first two things. We do the minor repairs, we do panel replacements, and we contract overlays. David's group in engineering, they do the design or manage the design and do the reconstruction projects.
What's a panel replacement?
We'll go over that here in a couple of slides. Question. Okay, on the minor maintenance and repairs, those are things you think of patching a pothole. We do some temporary asphalt patching on concrete streets until we can come back and make a small repair. We crack seal. We also do slab stabilization. That's kind of a neat and newer process to where when a concrete street panel is settled like this one, we actually drill holes in it, we inject foam, and it raises the panel back to grade. So we have had some success with slab stabilization. It's not an answer in every situation, but it's a quick alternative when it works. Panel replacement. Now we're moving into the larger scale work. That's when we go in and we replace the failed panels on a street or in an area. This is actually Mill Street down by the rodeo grounds. You can see these panels, these long panels. We even did a long stretch of sidewalk here. We do this with a contractor. And this is actually our contractor who's working right now on Hebron Parkway. I don't know if any of you have had the misfortune of being caught in that. I apologize. What happens, as long as 2 lanes are open, everything is fine. When the concrete trucks show up, or they're having to excavate, and we have to close 2 of the 3 lanes, we create a mess. So we got
Taco Casa?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's right down here at the light. We did Roberts Road.
Such a location.
We got funding this October for this project, and we knew we had to be out of this area before Thanksgiving. We did not want to have anything to do with this during Thanksgiving.
There's gonna be a nightmare then.
So we're working as quick as we can. He's headed east, and then we're out of it. So if you'll bear with us a few more weeks, we'll be done here.
This is a project, panel repairs, David was early on in his life in the organization, and they came up with the panel repair program. A lot of cities did, but before you would just kind of go patch the pothole and patch this, and now they've got better expertise. They understand how far they get back away from the cracks or the deteriorated part, take that section out, and it saves you a lot of money other than going to reconstruction. Now, there's periods like these that need to go to reconstruction. The entire area is probably damaged, but panel replacement has saved the city a lot of money when we're trying to do complete repairs or even getting them done. I mean, a lot of city streets would be even worse today if we did not do panel replacement.
This type of work can really extend the life of the street or keep it serviceable. You're always going to reach the point of reconstruction. We're just trying to stretch that out as far as we can. And Steve's right, these patches have gotten much bigger because we learned the hard way. Trying to be frugal, we'd go in, we'd saw out the damaged part, and then it would break right next to it and on each side of it. So we've learned to go back to clean joints where we have no breaks and to tie it in good. Cost a little more up front, but it lasts a lot longer. Overlays are what we do on our asphalt streets. The existing asphalt pavement is actually recycled into the subgrade. We add cement for stabilization, and then it's compacted. And before that asphalt's laid, that road bed is actually, you walk on it, it feels like a street. It is very stable. And then we place an asphalt layer on top of it.
Where's that?
This is Maple. This is a CDBG project
Okay.
we did a few years ago.
Okay.
Dave, you want to show before and after?
Show before and after.
Yeah, let's do that.
Do I have an ad?
When was this done, David?
No, this is like 07.
Okay, so this is Maple. You have Cowan at the top of the hill, and you're looking east. Hit your escape bar. So we'll kind of show you how fast this
Deteriorates.
This can go south. And this is
7,
not
8 years old.
This is not a heavily traveled road.
No,
either.
there's 3 houses and.
Kind of going back to our earlier discussion about asphalt versus concrete.
So how do I get back to my base map? Refresh. So y'all kind of remember what that looked like. Try to move fast here. This is a little dead-end street that runs off of Cowan before Lester. This is south of the intersection of Mill. So let's take a look at it now in 2013. 2014. Well, the picture is 2014. The wrong way. So nice, fresh. Now look.
Wow.
Wow.
See how it's cracked, and David and his crew have come back. They replaced the culvert here, and it's cracked all the way up the hill. Doesn't look so swell, does it? So it looked cool in 07, 08, but this is now 2013, and this is not a heavily traveled road.
And what you have to look at, though, you have your vehicle traffic, do you go in there and put concrete? I mean, you guys have to look at this program. Do you look at, okay, do I replace that in concrete with 3 vehicles, a lot of traffic? Crack sealing keeps the moisture out of it, putting the little stripes through there. Gives you extra life on that asphalt street. So those things you're going to deal with in the upcoming weeks is where you go on your priority. Again, this is just an example of how they look when they're done and how fast it deteriorates. But again, the cost of crack sealing or cost of patching or putting another overlay, how does that relate over a 30-year period of time in the cost of it?
And I won't say it's a cure-all because it's not, but we are using a product the last few years in that stabilization process that has really helped prevent that cracking that you see in asphalt street. It doesn't eliminate it, but it's significantly reduced it. So the streets now are looking better. I don't know they'll last that much longer, but they won't initially drop off in appearance like they have in the past.
And that was a 7-year period, right?
Yes. Now this is a reconstruction project. This is a picture I took from Westwood 2 that David's talked about, where they did new streets, new sidewalks, new curb ramps, new water lines, new sewer lines. And it completely just changes the face of the neighborhood when you do that. If you look, the grass looks a little greener. I think that attitude just kind of expands out from the right of way.
Your broken window effect, clean things up, things get fixed. I think you can see that probably all of our neighborhoods, the big neighborhoods. I think if you drive them, you'll see people take care of their yards a little better. They keep a little, not all areas, but generally there is some improvements when you do that.
In that Westwood area.
Okay, that tree in the parkway there,
Yes.
was that put in by, who's?
That probably survived construction, is my guess.
I was gonna say.
It's a strong tree. Generally, homeowners put those in when they're, years ago, I want a tree out between the sidewalk and the property line, or between the curb and the sidewalk, and those generally don't survive. As a matter of fact, if you go down Kingston, different areas in town where we have replaced streets, one of those trees left, big tall pine tree, and I remove, I don't know how many a year, a bunch.
One thing is a fact, when the tree is alive, it belongs to the homeowner. When it dies, it belongs to us.
But I've noticed that, like in the Westwood area, since the streets have been done, I've seen several of the houses painted. You're seeing some, I mean, they're painting the real solid colors and putting some ornamental iron on them. They've really dressed up some of those houses through there.
And I think with the neighborhood prevention program, code enforcement, all of the community activities, trying to all kind of combine together to improve the neighborhood.
Once one owner does it, then others see what can be done, and it's happening. It's beginning to happen.
Have you ever
It's beginning to look nice.
looked at in these areas that you're doing these full rehabs, have you compared the home values before and after to see if they've gone up?
I don't know that we have, within the city, we take before and after pictures, but as far as the values go, easily available for review. I mean, we know the dates we put them in, and we can check either side.
I think it would be interesting to look
Couldn't
at.
always isolate it to because of that. There may have been other things going on in the neighborhood, like,
Because
but you could.
it's also the economy and other things.
Yeah, the economy could have an effect on values.
We can get some
We check
examples of that.
Okay.
Okay, street conditions. In 2013, we contracted with a company to do a automated pavement condition survey. They surveyed 278 miles of city streets using that vehicle there. And that vehicle is designed to do this very thing. Please don't ask me about all the technology in it because I don't know.
Wow.
But they do a lot of work for Department of Transportations and counties and cities, and there's actually 4 or 5 companies in the country that do this. So it's a specialty, but there's several companies that do this.
Actually, David, it's called ground penetrating radar.
But this, this thing has all kinds, and I've read the information and read what it is, but I don't fully understand how all of it works. And this is the overall result, system-wide, that we got back. 71.9% of our streets were listed in good to satisfactory condition.
That's good.
Does that sound about what you would have expected? It didn't surprise us. It was close to what we expected. However, 22.3% were rated fair to poor. That's not great. And then 5.8 were rated very poor.
What should those numbers be? 85%?
Like 100. It
95%?
everything's great.
You'll never be 100, and you certainly don't want to reach 0.
Now, do you see those, are those in certain areas or just spread out all over?
No, it's the older areas, depending on whether they've been rebuilt or not. A lot of the projects you saw David describe as being in design or planned, those were bad.
They're probably
Those
that's
streets are
probably the 5% then, things that are
That
designed.
and some others scattered around.
And what we're going to bring to you is in that 22 or 27%.
That last 27%.
To get ahead of it, because by the time everything's in place and.
Some of the 71 goes down.
Yeah.
If you remember back to the 3 levels of maintenance, in a perfect world, we want to do level 1 and 2 to these streets. So they don't get down there so quickly. And we have to do reconstruction in this area. That's just a natural cycle that we're going to go through. But we want to slow this down, keep these better longer. That way you can spread this cost out over a longer time and it's more manageable.
And you remember in our discussion of the financial part of it, the discussion, I think Gina went over it, was we're putting $3 million,
Almost 4 million,
almost
3.9
4
million.
million to work on that top stuff.
Almost panel repairs we looked at and overlays and that type of work is almost $4 million a year.
And
And
that's,
in a perfect world, that's not enough. It needs to be twice that. So, or it could be twice that.
I kind of agree with Kristen. If we have a survey or some type of results to say, okay, before and after and how it improved your neighborhood, that's probably something we can go to voters and say, hey, your property value may go up. I don't care if it's only $2,000 or $3,000 or $5,000, just because your street looks better like that one you just showed us. You know, and I mean, to me, that's worth the money if my property value goes up. But of course, you know, the market can sway either way. But to me, that's something that people can recognize and say, well, hey, I can get some money in my pocket.
and there's several variables to that, just so you're aware of.
Okay.
One is the appraisal district, or the appraisal district and what they do. Last year, I think we had a 1 to 3% increase in property value. So, you know, was that totally to streets? I don't know.
Well, and I mean, that's where you embellish. You say it was part of.
Oh, yeah.
Or
No, I
maybe
understand.
due to, you know.
I just want to make sure everybody
Yeah.
understands there's multiple variables of how your property values increase when they appraise them.
You can't have a nice street in the yard that's 5 inches, you know,
Right.
high, you know.
We'll get those numbers for it. We'll get some examples of those back.
Okay, the project development, you know, the projects that we put together that you're gonna begin to look at next week. We took a lot of things into consideration. We started with the pavement condition survey. Like I said, the survey didn't surprise us, but it helped reinforce what we already knew about the streets, and it helped us, gave us a tool to kind of manage and put that together. So it was very useful. We also look at our pavement repair history, you know, any areas where we've done work since the survey was done and how that might have affected it. And how much work we put in certain areas before the survey was done and how much it may have affected the survey. So that was considered. And the third one is my favorite. Nothing beats going out and looking. And we've done a lot of that. I've looked at every project that I helped prepare 3 or 4 or 5 times. You know, you get out of the car and you walk down the street and you look. There's no substitute for that. We factored in water and sewer line conditions. You'll be given a couple of subdivisions that water and sewer line conditions play a big role in their prioritization because of the condition they're in. The streets aren't great either, but the water and sewer lines may be near critical.
And if
Also,
you're going to tear up one, you might as well tear up the other.
that's exactly right. That's the perfect time to do it all. Also, the thoroughfare plan, as David described, and the neighborhood approach. And I've got a slide I'll show you on that. So all those weigh into developing those projects and then prioritizing those projects. These are some dramatic photos of water main breaks. They're not all that bad.
Wow.
But I will tell you, they're all disruptive to the people who are out of water. They are. And if the hole happens to be in your front yard, it's very disruptive.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate I've only lived through a few of them, and after a few hours, you forget the water's off, and that becomes an inconvenience after about 8 hours. You're ready for water. So water lines play a big part in this process.
That's a lot of water.
This one, and Eric had to remind me where it was, because I wasn't sure that was it. It was on 121 out near Hawkins Prairie. And I remember I got a call that day from one of the guys that said, "You got to come see this." And I'm like, okay. When I got to Maine and 121, I could see this thing.
Wow.
And I was near panic, because I'm like, that can't be good.
Oh, he's like, that's not a broken sprinkler head.
This water geyser was 75 feet in the air.
Oh.
The police had closed 121 because the water was falling across 121.
Wow.
And it ended up being a little silly problem that we fixed rather easily, but it was very dramatic.
And that line also served to the east part of Lewisville, so there wasn't just a subdivision out, there was a,
Yeah,
but
we
they
had a
were
little
able to fix it
problem.
very quickly.
Wow.
And once again, here's that Westwood 2 project, and just reinforcing that neighborhood approach. You know, you could come in here and analyze every square foot and every inch of line, and this one may be a little better than this one or this one, but it sure looks nice, and it keeps the neighborhood together when you can take a neighborhood approach to it. Because all that infrastructure is essentially the same age. It may look a little better on the surface, but what's it gonna look like in 3 years if you don't do it all?
About 98, 2000, we were doing, and I'll use this as an example, Ashwood was a bad street. We do Ashwood, well, Briarwood and Springwood, they were all right, so we do Ashwood. And that'd been going on for 20 years. If you just do one street in the neighborhood, and then for 2 years, you would get complaints and calls, and then you'd have more water leaks. And the reason, why didn't you fix it all at one time? So that's the neighborhood approach. That was what we've been carrying forward on these. Like David and David have said, you may have one street that's good and the rest of them are bad. Well, you do that one and repair the water and sewer lines, get it 20, 25 more years of life, and move on down the road. So that's the neighborhood approach. You'll see a lot of that when we bring that back to you next week, especially in, again, residential neighborhoods.
You step out of your bond committee hats and put on your 2025 about thriving neighborhoods and identity and focal points in the neighborhoods and this, that, and the other. When we would saw cut Ashwood or Briarwood and put in a new sanitary sewer line, well, everybody's all right, but they saw the street under construction and they just figured new streets coming, and years ago, we'd do a long patch back. And they had a new sewer line, cool, but the street looked bad. So again, more the neighborhood approach, you do the complete package, and when you finish that, and the before and after really, they're quite phenomenal of what that does to a neighborhood. So as a bond committee, you're doing a lot of infrastructure things, but you're also carrying a big heavy hammer for success on the 2025 on your thriving neighborhood. So it's a crossover, big time crossover thing. So we think that's a good approach. bad news is you have to have the money to do all that.
Well, the good news is though, is that those people don't have to deal with construction over and
One
over
time,
and over.
right. You do the sanitary sewer, then hey, 2 years later, you're doing the water line, and then it's a bad deal, and they have to live there, and a lot of times people can't get in their driveways, they have to park on the other side, it's bad weather, it's a lose-lose thing doing it that way.
We had several neighborhoods that we had that old philosophy back. Lakeland Terrace was one of them. We put the water and sewer line in and then tore it all, or actually put the street in and then came back and put the water and sewer line afterwards.
Yeah.
It was a
Well,
mess.
Fox Avenue was done that way.
Yes.
So,
A lot of the valley, the Juniper, a lot of the mid-valley to northwest valley streets are that way. You'll see it's a nice saw cut on the concrete, but it just doesn't look good. It may be a drivable street, but if you get out there in the middle of the street and look at it, it just doesn't look good.
Okay, and starting next week, you'll get these project worksheets, which will list the project name, give you a description of the project, also will include costs. Now, there'll be other details as well. You'll get a project map. We're gonna show you a lot of pictures of the conditions that are out there. We'll talk in those areas where water and sewer are an issue. We'll describe those problems. We'll try to provide you all the information you need as you go through these projects.
One of the comments I made earlier when we first started, I think I mentioned to you that the water, David, flip back up that.
Oh.
The water and sewer line, if you look on that sheet, the water and sewer values will not be on your sheet next time, so don't, so where the water and sewer go? Well, again, water and sewer lines are gonna be taken out of what we call revenue bonds. And those revenue bonds do not go to the voters, they're covered by the enterprise fund and water and sewer. It's cities of business, water and sewer treatment, processing, sale, it's a sales product. I heard that at Rotary this morning. Those things are items that, it's a business, it's an operation, your water and sewer rates pay for those water line replacements, so that's how water lines and sewer lines are replaced. So it's through the enterprise fund and selling of bonds in those areas. If it's general maintenance, if we're able, we try to do replacement projects out of cash or what our reserves are in a smaller portion, but in these types of projects, they'll most likely be bond. And so I checked with the financial wizard over here. So, but those are generally a bond program when they get into replacing this many streets. Just goes into the funding.
I think it would be a good idea if we could, not all of the streets, but some of them, if we can do a field trip.
We have those planned. We'll work with you on how you want to do those. We can do them on a Saturday. We can do them one-on-one. We can do whatever you want to do. And you may want to pick streets. You may want to go view. There's going to be probably, 40 streets total between arterial neighborhoods?
Yeah.
Somewhere in that area. We get what we did last time, we had a bus tour, or we don't have our own buses, take you around, show you, go through those. Some of them you may not want to go, you may drive them all the time, but it's up to you. It's up to the committee, we'll set that up for you.
Interesting.
And we have pictures, we have tons of pictures coming for you. Also remember, when we do road trips and stuff, you may want to wait later on when you get ready to prioritize or before that, because the next topic that you're going to have after the street is drainage. Then you're going to have parks and trails, mainly trails. There's a lot of trails on this process. And then you've got facilities. Some of the facilities are existing that need to be replaced, but some of them are new. And we'll just have to describe those to you like a fleet facility. A new shop for fire and public, or the general government vehicles and stuff. We've got one now, but it won't be in the same location. It'll be in a new facility. So those are things that we can take on that field trip. You want to do separate, or you want to go after each topic, that's fine. Or you want to kind of make a tour where we go see streets and, oh, by the way, look, here's a trail that go on that street, we can do them all at one time, however you want to do it.
I think that's a good point too, because when we're looking at the cost of these, do you guys bring in that cost of both? Let's say a trail is, potentially could be down the street that could be under construction or ready for construction or proposed. Tying both of those costs together, will you guys build that together for us so that we can?
Yeah, what we're probably going to recommend to you is that we talked about $77 million in products or in bonds that we can issue. In that general, y'all talked about maybe going up if you want to increase the tax rate and stuff and those issues. But 77 is going to be your basic. And so we kind of looked at it, okay, and again, staff will just throw this out to you, but streets are your major infrastructure, streets and drainage, you know, somewhere in 60 million, 10 million for trails, somewhere in that area, and then 7 million or so for your facilities, somewhere in that area. We're just throwing that out for, you know, for you to look at where you're coming from. We're going to give you, you know, 90, 100 million in value on just streets alone, okay? The streets are the largest topic that you have, streets and drainage are your largest value in the bond package. Trails, same importance, but those are, you know, you're probably in the 10, 12 million. Facilities and buildings, you know, I'm up about 30, 35 million. But again, some of those you just have to, you know, that's what this group's going to do.
Yeah. And could there be a cost efficiency by combining like a trail plan on a particular?
Oh, yeah, well, yeah.
So that, will that be identified for us so that we can, hey, we want to, like, let's say, we don't want to do that trail. It's not a low priority. That's a low priority. However, that street's really bad. So you know what? Let's tie in that trail into that street. So then there's efficiencies.
We'll work to make sure we've got those covered. I think we do,
okay.
And we'll show those when we get there. But a lot of the trails are either on existing streets. You know, a lot of neighborhoods. You got a lot of neighborhoods, a lot of major thoroughfares. The major thoroughfares, like corporate and different things that we're working on, Valley Ridge, the trails are already programmed in. Okay, so yes, we'll take a look. Perfect.
And real quick, just because you brought it up, like the whole bond program, or you know, doing other things. I haven't looked up what Denton, how that fared in the voting.
I think it passed.
It did.
So it all passed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fort Worth passed. They just did.
I saw that, but didn't.
Fort Worth,
That was
Arlington's passed. I didn't see very few that went down.
It went down.
That failed.
Oh, it did.
No, I'm saying I didn't see many across the.
That had failed. Okay.
Failed. I think I saw one school district had a bond issue that failed somewhere in South Dallas, but what it was.
It was somewhere in here. I saw it somewhere. I don't know what it was offhand. It's in here somewhere. Or
I believe that includes their staff presentation. Again, the work begins next week as far as review, and we'll be presenting those. We'll go through each of the what staff's priority is and recommendation, along with a listing of others that go below that line. What we look at. And so you have the opportunity to look at all those projects. What you're going to see again is up somewhere in the above 60 million in value. But I can tell you there's a lot more that you're not going to see that are way down on the list. Okay? Because you've got about 170, 80 million in just street projects alone. And so we're going to bring you some to look at in the top priority of that whole scheme. And then you'll have to work that down in your priority rating. That makes sense, or am I?
No, that's good. So before I entertain a motion to adjourn, a couple things I want to mention. In your packet was provided some additional information that we had talked about last meeting. We're not going to go over it today. If you want to, there may be an opportunity for do that at a later date, but it's not on our agenda to cover. One is the survey from the 2025 plan, so that's your big first packet. And then there's two smaller sections. One's a tourism tip sheet on hot funds, and the other one is a publication put out by the Hotel and Lodging Association, and it talks about what cities need to know to administer municipal hotel occupancy taxes. So in there, it'll talk, I think one of the things we talked about was the ARC, so just take a look at that. And then is there anyone that knows now that they won't be here at the next meeting? Okay,
I will most likely be late.
okay, no worries. All right. Well, with that said, unless anybody has any other questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Second?
Second that.
Awesome. All those in favor? Signal with aye.
Aye.
Like sign for, okay. Hearing none, motion carries. We're adjourned.
All righty then.